Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. It's Wednesday. It's lunchtime. I hope you're all happy and healthy, doing the things you love for those you love to do them with. Maybe not happy, maybe a little bit intimidated. The story is, as of right now, it hasn't necessarily been completed yet, but Manchester United are about to sign, it looks like, for all intents and purposes, Mr. Benjamin Šeško from RB Leipzig for a monster fee. An absolute monster fee. I think it's 85 million euros, 80 plus 5, for a guy who I think scored 13 goals last season, only 8 of which were not penalties. I'll be honest, I like the player. I do. But I think that maybe United are doing it again because there's 8 non-penalty goals in the Bundesliga. What are we doing here? 85 million euros. The problem is, it sets a precedent. It reshifts the figure. The needle has moved again in the kind of buying market, selling market that is this particular transfer window. And what one club does affects the affordability and the outcomes of others, especially as another domino falls in the pursuit of a striker that Tottenham, Newcastle, Aston Villa, and every other team are also looking to acquire. Another Tottenham target, Evan Gassand. Well, I say another Tottenham target. Benjamin Šeško wasn't one, was he? But Evan Gassand certainly was. And he has joined Aston Villa last night, which is a shame for me because I really do like that player. I think he's going to be a very, very competent Premier League footballer. And I'm excited to see what he's capable of. Obviously, now that he's not wearing the lily whites, and also because Villa are obviously a direct competitor, I hope he doesn't do that well. But I do fear that he is going to be a surprise to the upside, a bit like Tierno Barry at Everton. Anyway, guys, we've got a lot of stories to talk about, and I hope you can do me some favours. I think I've already asked. If I know I haven't yet, smash the like button if you enjoy the content. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell. And drop your comments. Let me know your thoughts on today's topics. There's quite a lot to get through. There's about 12 names here. Ben Jacobs was on Last Word on Spurs last night. And as Ben likes to do, and I love the guy, he likes to give a lot of information, a lot of names. And, a lot of kind of relative obfuscation, a little bit of opaque information. So we're kind of left to chew on what that might mean. At the same time, guys, what I would say is, get used to, or if you're not familiar with already, you should be by now, the way that Johan Lang works at Tottenham. He likes to keep his cards close to his chest. So the absence of movement does not mean the absence of activity that we just can't see. And I think that we've sort of come to expect that with Johan Lang. It's a frustration. So we're left feeding off the scraps. And probably you could make the argument that all of the names in which we are linked to are not the players that we end up signing. And so maybe we should come to the conclusion of every story that's out there, whilst Johan Lang is pulling the strings at Tottenham, that they won't be the players that end up at Spurs. Kudus wasn't on the radar before he signed. Gibbs-White wasn't on the radar before he came close to signing. Palhinha was a story that, everybody was linked with, but, Tottenham were not really linked until very late on with that one. Even though we were sort of forcing the story here for quite a few months that it is an absolute no-brainer. Let's hope, given James Maddison's injury and Decky's injury and Jamie Donnelly's imminent loan move, that we have some activity that's happening behind the scenes, and that before I doubt we'll get one in before Thursday against Bayern Munich, but hopefully before next week's PSG game, we have something to celebrate and to talk about. Let's get into it though, guys. So just a bit of a strange one again. So Ben Jacobs last night said rumours of Rodrygo coming to Tottenham are not true, that the player hasn't put in a transfer request when he had a meeting with Xavi Alonso, and that rumours from elsewhere saying that that's not the case are far off the mark. Now, what's interesting, though, is that those rumours initially around Rodrygo were coming from kind of more spurious links like Fajacious and those sorts of areas. But actually, in the last 24 hours, AS has come back out again and said that Tottenham has actually put the bid in. And so it's a conflict. I don't know what to make of it, to be honest. Marca as well. And Marca are a serious outlet. They've said that it's true that Tottenham have put in a 90 million euro bid. So not the 100 million that was reported a couple of days ago that I brought to you, but that 90 million. Now, Cadena is also Cadena SER is also an ITK, and they're saying as well that it's true. And so, look, I don't know. Ben Jacobs Kadena, Marca, AS, Vajacius, everyone else is saying it's true. Who knows? As I said before, though, given what we know of Johan Lang, if there's lots of rumours abound, then it's probably a smokescreen or just a load of nonsense, because whatever we seem to be doing, whatever seems to materialise, seems to have come out of nowhere without much in the way of ITK or journalist knowledge. So anyway, the story is still bouncing around. Jacob says no. These other guys are saying yes. And they're starting to get into the much more serious journalists on the yes side. For me, as I say, it's a lot of money. I don't know how much money Tottenham have, but I would much prefer other options. And given the sort of situation we're in with regards loaning out most of our younger crop, most of whom are not going to get the minutes anyway, but a couple of them would. I was having this conversation with Lubo last night about Luka Vuskovic. I said, what's the argument for loaning him out to Hamburg or to other places? I think, by the way, Besiktas and Hamburg have both shown an interest in Vuskovic, and so have other teams in Germany as well. But apparently Tottenham, according to Ben Jacobs, are not interested in doing anything with Besiktas, which is interesting because Besiktas comes up in a couple of other stories for outgoing. So we might not necessarily want to loan a player there, but we might be interested in selling a player over there as long as they pass the financial fit test. I don't know. We'll talk about it when we get to that part in the story. But we're talking about Vuskovic. And I said, what's the argument? And Lubo said, obviously, because he won't get the minutes at Tottenham, so it's important to keep his progression, which of course makes sense. But given Tottenham's primary sort of shambolic results of last season could be, at least in the eyes of the defence of Ange Postecoglou, pointed upon the injury list as a catalyst, or at least a justification as to why there is context to that narrative. And so I made the argument that Vuskovic probably will get the minutes at Tottenham, knowing that right now we only have 3 sort of fit centre-backs in Romero, Van der Ven and Danso. If you include Ben Davies, there's not a lot more to work with after that, apart from Vuskovic. And so you could make the argument that given Micky van der Ven and Romero's relative appearances and injury crisis over the last couple of years, you could certainly make the argument that Vuskovic is going to get the minutes at Tottenham. So I don't think it will be that. I think it would be more down to they're not sure if he's quite ready for this level yet. And there's no disgrace. He's 18 years old. It's still early. He will be a monster, but I still think it's a very, very, I think a naive mistake here. I think that he will get minutes at Tottenham. And I think sometimes you have to sometimes you have to find out whether people are ready by throwing them in at the deep end. And I think him and people like Jamie Donnelly have always struck me as players that I feel like they're capable at any level, whatever size pond, or whatever lake or ocean you throw them in, they'll find a way to figure it out. So yeah, I'm not very much in favour of Vuskovic going to Germany or to Turkey, but that's the story. Tottenham are also, according to Ben Jacobs, looking at Van Hecke from Brighton, but Brighton don't want to sell him this summer. Very interesting player, good balance, good stats. I'm a big fan of Van Hecke, so I've got no issues if that's the argument where we're going with. But again, I would conclude again on these sort of defensive links by saying I don't really think it's the priority right now. I really think that the priority needs to be forward line stuff. He did say that Tottenham are focusing on a 10 and would prefer a 10 that hangs off the left, a 10/left winger, a story that I've been banging on about with you guys for a long, long time. Obviously, Eze is the sort of number one target I think that all Tottenham fans would absolutely get behind and would celebrate universally, which is a rarity in the Tottenham fan base to have unified output on a certain opinion. Eberechi Eze, for what it's worth, according to Mike Brown, who spoke to Football Insider, Mike Brown is saying that Tottenham are back in for Eberechi Eze, which I'm not going to be someone that's going to be claiming ITK sources. I've learned that lesson, but for what it's worth, I've heard sort of mutterings and things as well about the fact that Eze has been discussed recently at lunches at the training ground and stuff. So it will be interesting to see if there is any truth there. At the same time, it seems like Arsenal are moving away from it. Rumours out in various sources in the Arsenal fan base yesterday saying that Arsenal are moving in a different direction because they just don't see Eze at the price point that Crystal Palace want. They think that £68 million is too much, as do a lot of other clubs, apparently including Tottenham, according to Ben Jacobs, who said that they see that Eze is more valued at sort of 50 to 60. Again, nickeling and diming. I know that 8 million is a lot of money. It's a hell of a lot of money. But at the end of the day, considering the situation that we're in, the proximity to a Super Cup and chance for another major trophy, and the fact that we have absolutely no outlets, no options, no creative sparks, and that you could ideally kill 2 birds with 1 stone for the first few months of the season. You can play Eze in the 10, and then when maybe Decky or Maddison do get back, you then might be able to move him out to the left. But in the meantime, you can potentially play, give Odebear or Tel some minutes as well. So it doesn't cop block anybody. It makes a hell of a lot of sense. And like I say, if 60 million pounds, the upper valuation of where Tottenham and other clubs think he's valued at, but Palace wants 68, are we really going to miss it for a biscuit? I think we should have learned that lesson over the last few years. Interesting one, guys, out of Everton land. So Iliman Ndiaye, right, the absolute class left winger over at Everton, is has apparently been offered to Inter Milan. And Inter Milan are not focused on him. They are more interested in trying to conclude the deal for Ademola Lookman, who we've spoken about ad nauseum. And this is coming from, as I say, it's out on Twitter in various sources, but it's also I think it's been spoken about in L'Équipe as well, which is a strange one. But anyway, the sort of takeaway for me, there's no link to Tottenham here, but he's a classy player, a really, really exciting player. And if he's been, quote unquote, offered to Inter, then does that suggest that Everton are looking to move a player on? It doesn't really make any sense, because I think that I'm pretty sure I read yesterday on Football Inc. that David Moyes was looking to bring in 6 new players to Everton, 2 of whom were going to be wide guys. So it doesn't really make any sense, but I just thought I'd bring it to your attention that and it was coming from pretty respectable journalists. So if there is any truth to it, then that might be something that we might like to look at. But anyway, we shall move on. Other stories. This is an interesting one as well. So Tottenham, obviously, the idea that Tottenham will be getting Rodrygo or won't be getting Rodrygo hasn't necessarily put Tottenham off looking at Real Madrid. Stories out today as well regarding Brahim Diaz, who is a creative midfielder, very, very extraordinary talent. Big fan of his. I'd love to see Tottenham go in for it. Apparently, we've made advances and phoned up Real Madrid, asked about the inquiries and whether there's any availability. And apparently, the door was shut pretty quickly on that one. That both the Real Madrid team see him as sort of not for sale. They like him as a bench option. They like him as an impact player. And also the player wouldn't want to come. He's happy in Madrid. So again, when you're trying to fish in a certain sea, maybe these players just don't want to come to Tottenham yet. We're not quite of that caliber. And it's fair enough. It's fair enough. So we'll move on. How about this one? We thought we were done with this one. Ilya Zabani, right? We spoke about him for the last few weeks. Tottenham apparently put in a monster bid. Apparently he was accepted by Bournemouth, but apparently the player wants to go to PSG. Apparently then PSG had actually upped their price. Apparently a couple of days ago, it was a done deal. The here we go wasn't quite given, but it was all but done. Well, L'Équipe is saying that actually Paris Saint-Germain have suddenly lost they've gained pessimism. So they've lost their optimism. They're suddenly sort of feeling like it's not going to happen for one reason or another. And that Tottenham and Newcastle are both circling with intent. And I don't know what's changing, what's going on there. I've got no idea. The story just sort of talks basically about the fact that for whatever reason, the player, the agent, everyone involved in the club is getting in the deal is getting very frustrated. But for some reason, there's no movement. And that as a consequence of that, if it does break down, Tottenham and Newcastle could both pounce. And both teams obviously looking for a centre-back. I think Newcastle need a centre-back. Tottenham probably do when you think about it in reality, only having 3 fit centre-backs. But how long is Rodrygo going to be out for? And what else are we doing here? To me, it's a strange one. Either way, Zabani back in, apparently. But it's just bringing it to your attention, guys. Bringing it to your attention. Just to carry on with the movement. So Jarell Hatto, Ben Jacob mentioned that Jarell Hatto was of interest to Tottenham and that they had made inquiries. But as soon as Chelsea picked up the phone, that Jarell Hatto was all over that like beans on toast. Tottenham are also interested in Leicester City's El Khanous and that he is desperate to play in the Premier League. He might be putting in a transfer request if Leicester block the move, and that Tottenham are one of several clubs that are interested. As I say, I don't know the player all that well, but from what I've seen of El Khanous on the Y-Scout, when I ran it through, he came across to me as someone that if you just look at the highlights, you're going to say, wow. But when you look at the everything reel and you see dialed in observations of different departments of his game and you see a long list of different examples of him doing the same thing over and over again, you'll see a lot of what I would call highlight merchantry, right? He's just someone that I think likes to do things that are complex and tricky and flicky and all that stuff because it looks good when sometimes simpler passes are on the table and they would actually provide better output. So I think he's a little bit too flamboyant at this stage, but he's 21. He's surely, a very, very, very strong talent. we shall see whether or not Tottenham make a move. I don't think that's the sort of move that's going to satisfy many Tottenham fans, but it is what it is. Rafael Leao. So Ben Jacobs has said that Tottenham have made a move or they've shown interest and are thinking about or whatever, contemplating having discussions around making a move for Rafael Leao. The problem is that he absolutely loves Milan. He doesn't want to leave the city. He loves the club, and he's a big deal over there. The other side of the coin, though, is, of course, that AC Milan don't have European football this year. And so as a consequence of that, maybe Milan will need to sell to complete other ventures. Maybe their financial limitations are strapped. And then, of course, you have potentially the third variable there, which is Fabio Paratici, his relationships with Italy. I think he apparently knows people close to Leao's camp as well. And so there's a chance that maybe something would happen. Let me know if you would like Rafael Leao. As I said before, he's maybe a little bit like a Benjamin Sesko, but I think if Benjamin Sesko is 85 million euros, this is the concern for me. When you set the precedent for certain types of players at certain calibers, certain age points, and certain levels of outcomes, then it means that everybody else is going to value their players according to that new benchmark, that new comparable. And for me, I don't think Sesko is anything like an 85 million euro player. Like I say, 8 goals last year that weren't penalties in the Bundesliga with one of the better teams in the Bundesliga. Not particularly impressive. He is a real talent for sure, don't get me wrong. And I do think I'd love him at Tottenham, but at 85 million euros, and I know you're going to say it's not our money, why do we care? You care because of 2 reasons. One is it's an opportunity cost. Right? What you're spending on one player, you can't spend on the other. And the other reason why I have an opinion about the player going to Manchester United is because people are going to sit there and say, look at what Manchester United have done. They haven't got European football and they've just dropped £200 million and used 200 million as the justification for the argument that it means more than it would do if it was 150. But really, they probably overpaid for Sesko by about 25, 30 million. And I don't know about Cunha and Mbeumo, but I feel like Manchester United might have made another boo-boo. Think about how much they paid for Rasmus Højlund and how that worked out. Think about what they paid for Sancho and how that worked out. Think about how much they paid for Antony and how that worked out. Just because Manchester United can doesn't mean that they should, and doesn't necessarily mean that we should be sitting there, I don't know, with green eyes thinking that the grass is greener, because there's problems to those sorts of things that manifest down the track if in fact those things become sort of dead weight or paperweights or or just problematic situations like with Marcus Rashford and him not moving on a massive contract and getting loaned out everywhere for the rest of his time. It's there's issues to overpayments, and I don't subscribe to them just because other teams do. And I think that the problem is that there is collateral damage. If Tottenham are interested in Rafael Leao, now they'll probably look at the fact that he's going to go for 85 million and say, well, if he's 85, then he's 100, etc. And that's how these things can spiral out of control. Another player that we have been linked with, guys, in the past is Xavi Simons of RB Leipzig, funnily enough. Ben Jacobs poured cold water over that, saying Tottenham are not interested. Again, there's lots and lots of people out there that's saying that we are interested. Who knows where the truth lies? But when an ITK speaks or a journalist speaks, I'll bring it to your attention, and we can sort of chew over it and let me know your thoughts. Let me know if any of these stories make sense to you or otherwise. Apparently, we've also been offered, Ben Jacobs said, Tottenham have been offered Dusan Vlahovic and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I mean, I don't know who this is where you kind of sit there and scratch your head, because Dominic Calvert-Lewin is a free agent. So who offered him? The agent offered him? Daniel Levy, would you like an orange? I can offer you an orange. Like, what are we doing here? He's a free agent. It doesn't make any sense. I really hope there's no truth to it, because if Tottenham Hotspur are considering Dominic Calvert-Lewin as like a stand-in, because Richarlison's our only fit striker right now, and because of all the other creative cop blocks we've got in our with our injury crisis, then we got real problems, and that would be enough for me to go over the edge and go apoplectic. As far as Dusan Vlahovic, look, it's one of those stories where there's part of me that thinks like I'd take him because he's a brand name, right? And I think it sounds sexy, and he used to be a big deal, and he hasn't exactly completely flopped at Juve, but there's a reason why Juve want him gone. There's a reason why Juve want Muani instead. And it's not like Muani absolutely smashed it out of the park when he was there. They've got relatively, although different sample sizes in terms of games, a relatively very similar output record, the two of them. I just think that in terms of their time at Juve, for me, I think that there's something about the Dusan Vlahovic story, and I just think that he was an amazing player when he was coming up at Fiorentina, whenever I saw him at Juve, he didn't look like the same player. Maybe his motivation dropped a little bit when he got the big money. And also, there's a massive step up to the Premier League. It's a different style of football, different speed of game. And he's not someone that I think is going to benefit from the fewer seconds that you have on the ball, the fewer time to think, all those sorts of things. I think he's a very talented player, but I think there's a lot of risk. It depends on the price and depends on the salary as well, I guess, for me to figure out whether I think there's value in it. Obviously, it's not my money, so why should I care? Again, opportunity costs. Does he improve us? Would I think he would start ahead of Richarlison 100%? Am I panicking though that we've only got a week left until the PSG game, but the window's still open for another 3 or 4 weeks? Not really. There's loads of no team is fixed, are they? No team is finished. Liverpool still need help at the back. Villa still need a lot of work done. Newcastle still need a hell of a lot of work done. Manchester City are probably the only team that look like they're just about done and now thinking about succession planning rather than immediate impact. So, everyone can sit there and think that it's been a frustrating window. I'm happy to hear it, and I agree with you. But at the same time, it's not like anybody really. The vast majority of teams are sitting in a pretty position thinking that they don't have any more work to do. It is what it is. Bissouma, guys. Yves Bissouma, apparently there's offers coming in from Saudi, from Turkey, and from America for the player. Again, not sure if he's going to take any of those. He did apparently intimate previously that he doesn't want to leave Tottenham, or at least doesn't want to leave the Premier League. And so he will probably be offered a few different places, but whether he takes them or not, another cock block potentially. I think that's about it, guys. Yeah, Eze done it. Joel Hatta Canusli. Yeah, I think that's about it, guys. I'll leave it there. I'll be back this afternoon. Let me know your thoughts, though, on how you feel about things like Sesko going to Manchester United, if it does happen. Is that like a hammer blow for you? Look, they've clearly improved their front line, but they spent a fortune doing it. And if they are still struggling to move players on, which it looks like they will be until the very end of the window, they still haven't resolved their centre-back issues. They're still looking for a DM, apparently, and they are still, very much looking for a goalkeeper. Unless they have some sort of investment coming in, I'm struggling to figure out how they can afford it until they move some of these players on. But maybe they're thinking that Mason Greenwood is going to leave Marseille, I think he's at. And if so, then they receive 50% of the sell-on. And the rumours were out yesterday that the current owner club, I think it's Marseille, have got a €90 million asking price on his head. So you see how these things can get blown up very quickly out of all proportion. It's a weird market. Some players are going for a lot lower than you'd think. Other players are going for wild money at the top end that don't deserve it. That's the game. And I guess, value is in the eye of the beholder. But really, really, Tottenham, I hope that we can get an Eze story percolating. Nothing more in regards Lucas Paqueta to bring to your attention. Nothing else with regards any of the other stories like Mark Casado that came out yesterday. That's about it, guys. I'll let you go. Enjoy your Wednesday. I'll see you later on for a live or maybe a double update today. Like, subscribe, and comment. Football Inc. is also coming up this afternoon, so keep a lookout for that. And I'll see you later. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always,